It was once a beacon of stability in a tumultuous region. But today, there are few signs that Venezuela was once a place of hope.
2.5 million migrants from Venezuela have crossed the border, fleeing crisis at home.
Nicolas Maduro's opponents see him as a dictator who's ruled with an iron fist.
The men and women of our military successfully captured Maduro, and it was dark, and it was deadly.
How did a country that owns the world's largest oil reserves end up so poor? The story of modern Venezuela begins in the middle of the 20th century. The home country of Simon Bolivar, who liberated large parts of South America from the Spanish, was transitioning from a decade of military dictatorship to democracy. But it was what lay beneath the soil that held the key to Venezuela's destiny.
The city of Caracas, capital of Venezuela, is enjoying a prosperity boom unparalleled in the history of South America. But where does all the money come from? The answer lies under the ground, where rich oil deposits ensure a steady revenue.
Venezuela sits on an estimated 18% of the world's oil reserves, the largest in the world.
The oil industry has been the backbone of Venezuelan economy for the last close to 100 years. And in that sense, Venezuela follows the same pattern as other countries that are rich in resources, like minerals and oil, where there's an overdependence on those resources. And because they have access to funds through those resources, it delays for these countries to make some necessary adjustments and even investing in other parts of the economy.
Venezuela's oil was initially controlled by 3 foreign companies, and for more than 20 years, vast amounts of wealth flowed out of the country. But in 1943, Venezuela adopted a law requiring oil companies to pay half their profits to the state. It created a steady cash flow amid strong oil prices. By the 1980s, Venezuela nationalized its oil industry. But global oil prices were dropping fast, and the decade was marked by a shrinking economy, made worse by wealthy elites fleeing overseas and violent protests against austerity measures. By 1989, inflation rose from 6 to 84%. This set the stage for the election of a man who would become central to Venezuela's story. Hugo Chavez was a military officer in the Venezuelan army. He developed Marxist sympathies and political theories centered around anti-imperialism and social welfare policies. Named after the revolutionary Simon Bolivar, his ideology would be known as Bolivarianism. In 1992, Chavez was jailed for leading a failed military coup. After his release, he ran in the 1998 presidential elections, promising to tackle economic inequality in the country.
Nuestro proyecto es un proyecto humanista y autogestionario. Es un proyecto integral, además, en lo político, en lo moral, en lo social, en lo económico, en lo militar, que busca la reintegración de la sociedad venezolana e impulsar un proyecto económico autogestionario y humanista que ponga en primer lugar al hombre, a la mujer, al niño venezolano, al ser humano.
He won with 56% of the vote. As president, he called for a constitutional assembly to draft the Bolivarian constitution, enshrining social rights and overhauling the political structure. He also introduced vast social programs on education, housing, healthcare, and food, among others. These were known as the Bolivarian missions.
He was somebody with a revolutionary agenda that wanted to change the situation in the country and elevate of some sort the masses that have been historically disenfranchised, that all of a sudden had all of this oil revenue. And what he did is that he started, giving it away to his supporters. It was a way to earn support.
But while Chavez gained support at home, the United States was souring on the country. The U.S. had long opposed leftist governments in Latin America. It had been involved in plots to overthrow leftist leaders for decades, including in Chile and Brazil. And in Cuba, it used economic coercion after a failed invasion. In Venezuela, earlier laws that nationalized the oil industry were rolled back in favor of neoliberal reforms pushed by the International Monetary Fund. Chavez reversed course in 2001 and again nationalized the country's oil industry. Major U.S. oil companies left. He then forged alliances with socialist Latin American countries like Cuba and Bolivia as an alternative to U.S.-dominated blocs.
Nosotros creemos en la necesidad de conformar en América Latina, comenzando por el bloque suramericano, una especie de mega-estado.
However, no effort was made to address Venezuela's dependence on oil. As other oil-dependent countries such as Saudi Arabia or Norway invested revenues into other sectors of the economy, Chavez continued to inject oil cash into his Bolivarian missions. That model is sustainable only when oil prices are high. Reality would soon hit the country hard. Chavez died in 2013 from cancer, just a year after being re-elected president for the fourth time. His hand-picked successor, Nicolas Maduro, would go on to win the election that year. But the country's economy once again tanked when oil prices crumbled in 2014. State revenues dried up and the value of the Bolivar currency depreciated, leaving the state unable to pay for its social programs and food imports. In response, the government printed more money, sparking one of the worst hyperinflation crises in the history. In 2018, inflation skyrocketed to 130,000%.
11,000 bolívares, paquetico de galletas, una lechocita, 3 platanitos, un pedacito de pescado, un poquito de jamón y un poquito de queso.
Sí, porque a veces no tenemos nada que comer, pasando el hambre, porque no conseguimos, mi marido a veces no tiene real, yo tampoco, y no conseguimos nada en la calle, no. Pasamos el día sin comer, si comemos un pedacito de pan cada uno, un pedacito de ahí con agua.
As a result, more than 7.9 million people have fled the country over the last 12 years. At the same time, a brewing political crisis exploded in 2018. That year, the presidential election was marred by irregularities, according to several international observers. Maduro's supporters, the Chavistas, have been losing their majority in parliament since 2015.
The National Assembly that was at that point controlled, or the opposition had a majority of members, decided to invoke a specific article that says this is not a legitimate election, there's not a legitimate president, and in that case, if the president is not able to be in power, and the vice president either, then it's the president of the National Assembly that can take over.
So in 2019, the opposition-led National Assembly voted Juan Guaido in as the interim president. That meant Venezuela now had 2 presidents, each determined to take the other down.
Porque para los que creen que nos desinflamos, que se enfrió la calle, creo que se van a quedar con los crepos hechos. Porque aquí hay gente en la calle para rato.
Maduro was recognized by the government's traditional allies, while Guaido had the support of Western countries. A standoff ensued between the government and the opposition on the streets, in the National Assembly, and internationally. But harsh repression, combined with the judicial powers siding with the government, resulted in the movement's influence waning over time.
It became clear that he had no control. I mean, that he was a president in paper, but not a real president able to exert control. The protest ended because there was a clear campaign of intimidation and repression by the government.
The U.S. started imposing sanctions on Venezuela as early as 2006, but they were ramped up in 2017 during Trump's first term. He put sanctions on Venezuelan oil and gas purchases and blocked the country's access to U.S. financial markets. This led to a severe drop in the country's exports. The Biden administration eased some oil sanctions in 2023 in exchange for free elections the following year. The country's economy stabilized, but the U.S. dollar became Venezuela's everyday currency. When the 2024 presidential election got underway, the opposition rallied behind former lawmaker Maria Corina Machado.
Yo tengo otra aproximación. Yo tengo que llegar hasta aquí. Vamos a ver dónde carrizo sacamos estos recursos, pero aquí vamos a llegar. Y que quede claro, me voy a inscribir, vamos a derrotar a Maduro, Javier, y va a estar...
However, the Supreme Court barred Machado from running, so she threw her weight behind Edmundo González Urrutia. Although polls showed he had a sizable lead over Maduro, the election committee handed a victory to Maduro. The official results were never published, but the opposition claimed González won with 68% of the vote.
And the reason why they know it's not because the National Electoral Council said so. In fact, the National Electoral Council said Maduro won. They know it because they organized this resistance movement, and they had volunteers in every single poll station in the country that got a copy of the tally sheets issued by the computers that they used to vote in Venezuela. And using that, they were able to show that the Electoral Council is totally biased and gave Maduro the election when in fact he had not won.
This led to another political crisis, but this time the U.S. would insert itself more directly into Venezuela's affairs.
Look, Venezuela did terrible things to the United States. They sent hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people, into our open border. They sent their criminals, they sent their prisoners, they sent their drug dealers.
Donald Trump escalated tensions with Venezuela, threatening to drag Maduro to the U.S. for alleged drug crimes. The U.S. led a months-long campaign in the Caribbean, building up its forces and striking what it called drug boats. Without offering proof the boats were involved in drug trafficking, critics warned that the U.S. was breaking international laws. Maduro offered to negotiate a way out of the crisis, but to no avail. On January 3, 2026, the U.S. launched an operation to capture Maduro. The Venezuelan leader and his wife were abducted and taken to New York, where they await trial. Since then, the U.S. said it would run the country and its oil fields would be open to U.S. companies. But the Bolivarian regime remains intact, and the opposition is sidelined. Trump says he's directly negotiating oil access with Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, who's now the acting president.
So what will happen? We don't know. There's no clear timetable for the return of democracy to the country. The U.S. is trying to bring foreign investors into the country, and some experts say that won't happen. Investors will not feel comfortable going into Venezuela until there's a rule of law, and there are free elections, and there's like an environment where investments are guaranteed. So it's a wait-and-see situation.